At 10:47 p.m. on November the 27th, 1950, Technical Sergeant John Audas crouched behind a frozen M1919 Browning machine gun on Fox Hill, watching Chinese infantry mass in the darkness 300 yards downslope. Temperature was minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping. His weapon, the only heavy machine gun covering the eastern approach to the perimeter, had stopped firing. The gun wasn't jammed. It was frozen solid. Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, held a mountain pass 7 miles south of Yudam-ni. 240 Marines on a frozen hilltop in North Korea. Below them, the only road capable of handling vehicles. Behind them, 8,000 Marines trapped at Yudam-ni reservoir, surrounded by 8 Chinese divisions. If Fox Hill fell, that road closed. If the road closed, 8,000 men died. The problem wasn't the Chinese. The problem was the cold. Minus 25 tonight. Forecast said minus 35 by dawn. At those temperatures, the M1919 Browning machine gun failed. The weapon used oil-based lubricants. That turned to paste below minus 10 degrees. The bolt mechanism seized. The recoil spring stiffened. The gun stopped cycling. A machine gun that couldn't fire was 31 pounds of useless steel. Audas had been a machine gunner for 8 years, 2 in the Pacific during the war, 6 in peacetime. He knew the weapon inside and out. Belt-fed, water-cooled when available, air-cooled in the field. Effective range 1,500 yards. Rate of fire 400 to 600 rounds per minute. Reliable in every climate from Guadalcanal jungles to California deserts. But it couldn't function in Korean winter. The first Marine Audas lost to the cold was Corporal Eddie Riley. November 28th, 0600 hours. Chinese probe attack hit the northern perimeter. Riley's M1 Garand froze during the firefight. He tried to clear it manually. The charging handle wouldn't move. A Chinese soldier got within 15 feet before Riley's foxhole partner shot him. Riley died that afternoon when a second probe came. His rifle still wouldn't fire. The second Marine was PFC James Gallagher, found frozen at his position on the morning of November 29th. Gallagher had fought off 2 Chinese soldiers with his entrenching tool when his carbine froze. The exertion in sub-zero temperatures caused his body core temperature to drop. He'd frozen to death in his foxhole while his weapon lay useless beside him. By November 27th, Audas had watched 9 Marines die or get wounded because their weapons failed at critical moments. The cold weather manual said to strip all lubricant and run weapons dry. Audas tried that. Dry weapons wore out firing pins in 200 rounds. Carbon buildup jammed the actions worse than frozen oil. Either way, the guns stopped working. Chinese loudspeakers echoed across the frozen valley. Marines, you are surrounded. You cannot be reinforced. You will freeze, surrender, and live. Audas looked at his seized machine gun, looked at his 17-man crew manning 3 gun positions on the eastern slope. The first major assault was coming. He could hear Chinese units moving in the darkness, boots crunching on frozen ground, officers calling orders in Mandarin. His gun was useless. The first Chinese assault hit at 11:45 p.m. on November 27th. 800 soldiers from the 59th Division came up the eastern slope in waves. Audas's frozen machine gun sat silent. His crew fought with M1 rifles and fragmentation grenades. Without machine gun suppression, Chinese infantry reached within 30 yards of the Marine positions. Only artillery fire from Hagaruri, 7 miles south, stopped them. At dawn, 12 Chinese bodies lay in front of Audas's position. 4 Marines were wounded. 1 was dead. The morning of November 28th, Audas stripped all lubricant from his weapons per the cold weather manual, ran them completely dry, test-fired 50 rounds. The gun cycled perfectly. That night, the Chinese attacked again. Audas fired 180 rounds before the firing pin cracked from metal fatigue. The weapon was disabled. Now he had 0 working machine guns covering the eastern approach. On November 29th, Marines tried keeping weapons near small warming fires. The heat kept the mechanisms functional, but the smoke gave away positions. Chinese mortars bracketed the fires within minutes. 2 Marines died from shrapnel drawn to the warming flames. Captain William Barber, already wounded in the leg and refusing evacuation, ordered no more fires near fighting positions. P.F.C. Thomas McClure tried keeping his bolt assembly inside his parka between attacks. Body heat kept the metal warm. But when he reinstalled the bolt for the next firefight, condensation from his body heat had collected on the steel. The moisture froze instantly in the sub-zero air. The bolt seized inside the receiver. The gun was completely disabled. The smell on Fox Hill was frozen canvas and cosmoline preservative and cordite from rifle fire. Blood didn't pool. It froze black against the snow. Sleeping bags crackled with ice crystals. Metal was so cold, it burned exposed skin on contact. Marines learned to work their weapons with bare hands for dexterity, accepting frostbite as the price of function. By the evening of November 29th, Fox Company had 26 wounded and 8 dead. Most casualties occurred during moments when weapons failed. Marines caught with frozen rifles in close combat. Machine gunners unable to provide suppressing fire. The battalion radioed, "Can you hold?" Barber responded, "We're holding, but we can't hold without working machine guns." Battalion said, "No resupply possible. Chinese control all routes. You're on your own." Audas had served in the Aleutian Islands during the war. He'd maintained weapons in cold weather before. He knew there had to be a solution the manual didn't cover, something the procurement officers in warm offices hadn't considered. That evening, he made a decision that violated every regulation in the Marine Corps Technical Manual. Audas remembered the Aleutian Islands in 1943. Aircraft mechanics there used graphite lubricant for cold weather operations. Graphite didn't freeze because it was a dry lubricant, microscopic particles that stayed slippery at any temperature. But the machine gun manual explicitly forbid graphite. The technical order said it would accelerate wear and void the weapon's service warranty. No Marine had authorization to use it. There was no graphite in the supply system. Audas searched the perimeter for anything useful. He found a wrecked Jeep near the command post and a burned-out supply truck 30 yards behind the lines. In the truck's cab, he found map cases. Inside the map cases, he found pencils. Pencil lead was graphite, mixed with clay. It might be pure enough to work. At 10:30 p.m. on November 29th, Audas worked alone in a blown-out Korean house 20 yards behind the perimeter. He had 1 candle for light. Couldn't risk more illumination because Chinese snipers were active. He, or T, disassembled the M1919 bolt assembly on the frozen floor. His hands were already frostbitten. The skin had cracked open across his knuckles. His fingers were numb and bleeding. He crushed 6 pencils with his rifle butt, scraped the graphite powder into an empty ration tin, mixed it with a few drops of lighter fluid to help carry the graphite into the weapon's mechanisms. He used bristles from a toothbrush to apply the mixture to the bolt surfaces. Worked the graphite into the extractor, the firing pin channel, the recoil spring housing. If this failed, the gun was ruined, contaminated with unauthorized lubricant. If he got caught, he faced court-martial for destroying government property during combat. If the modification worked, but damaged the gun during firing, the weapon could explode and kill his entire crew. But without working machine guns, the perimeter would fall. The Chinese would break through. 8,000 Marines would die trapped at the reservoir. The graphite got everywhere. His hands turned completely black. He had to work with bare fingers because gloves were too thick for the detailed work. His skin stuck to the frozen metal parts. He dropped the firing pin twice in the darkness and had to search for it by feel on the dirt floor. Chinese probes were happening 100 yards away. He could hear bugles and whistles in the night. The modification took 40 minutes for 1 gun. At 11:45 p.m., he reassembled the weapon and test-fired 10 rounds into the hillside. The gun cycled perfectly, even in minus 30-degree cold. He modified the second gun, then the third. By 1 a.m. on November 30th, all 3 crew-served weapons were modified. Only his 17-man crew knew. They agreed not to tell the officers. Just see if it worked. At 2 a.m. on November 30th, the Chinese 59th Division committed 2 full regiments to the assault. Over 2,000 soldiers attacked Fox Company's 240 Marines. The main attack hit the eastern approach, directly at Audas's positions. The Chinese strategy was simple: overwhelm the weakened American line, break through to the road, cut off the escape route. Chinese bugles sounded at 2:17 a.m. Whistles blew across the frozen valley. A mass of infantry rose from the darkness and moved uphill through the snow. At 2:18 a.m., Audas positioned himself behind his modified machine gun. He charged the bolt. The metal moved smoothly, despite the minus 32-degree temperature. He aimed into the advancing mass. At 2:19 a.m., he pulled the trigger. The gun fired, it didn't stop. 50 rounds, 100 rounds, 200 rounds. The bolt cycled smoothly with no freezing, no hesitation, no seizing. Audas traversed the gun left to right, cutting down Chinese infantry at 150 yards. P.F.C. Morrison, his assistant gunner, shouted over the noise. The gun was working. Actually working. Corporal Benson fed ammunition belts as fast as Audas could fire. 50 yards south, gun number 2 opened up with continuous fire. 50 yards north, gun number 3 joined in. 3 machine guns created interlocking fields of fire across the eastern slope. In previous attacks, the Chinese had learned that American machine guns fired briefly, then stopped, then went silent. Chinese infantry had learned to wait out the short bursts, then advance during the silence. This time was different. The guns didn't stop. Continuous sustained fire cut down entire squads before they reached halfway up the slope. Chinese assault formations shattered against the wall of bullets. By 2:43 a.m., Chinese infantry had fought to within 40 yards of Audas's position. His gun had fired over 800 rounds and was still cycling perfectly. All 3 machine guns fired simultaneously in a final protective line. The Chinese assault broke. Bugles signaled retreat at 3:15 a.m. The attacking force withdrew down the slope into darkness. At dawn, the Marine count found over 400 Chinese dead on the eastern slope. Audas's section had 3 wounded Marines, 0 killed. His machine gun was too hot to touch, despite the sub-zero air. The barrel glowed faintly in the early light. He had fired 1,247 rounds continuously without a single malfunction. Other machine gun crews had watched what happened. By morning, they were asking what Audas had done to his weapons. He showed them the pencil graphite. By noon on November 30th, every crew-served weapon in Fox Company was modified. The officers noticed the improved performance, but didn't ask questions. Captain Barber, wounded and commanding from a stretcher, said he didn't care what they did. Just keep doing it. The Chinese attacked again on the night of November 30th. 1,100 soldiers came up the slopes in coordinated waves. Every machine gun in Fox Company was now graphite modified. The sustained fire broke the assault in 35 minutes. 250 Chinese soldiers died on the frozen ground. 8 Marines were wounded, 1 killed by mortar fire. The pattern was clear. Modified weapons were enabling the defense. Word spread across the Marine positions at Chosin. Fox Company radioed other units about the solution for frozen weapons. Easy Company, 5 miles north, asked what solution. The description passed over radio nets against communications regulations. Other units started scavenging pencils from whatever sources they could find. The modification spread from position to position, Marine to Marine, whispered in foxholes, and passed along through machine gun crews. On the night of December 1st, temperatures dropped to minus 35 degrees. Chinese probe attacks hit every 90 minutes through the darkness. Modified machine guns fired on demand every time. Unmodified weapons in other sections of the perimeter showed 60% failure rates. Body counts told the story. Most Chinese dead were concentrated in sectors where modified guns provided cover. Chinese commanders noticed the change after 3 failed assaults on Fox Hill. During daylight on December 1st, observers watched Marine positions from distant ridges. They saw machine guns firing test bursts. Previously, those same guns had been silent. Chinese intelligence reported that Americans had somehow solved the cold weather equipment problem. The 59th Division changed tactics. They began avoiding Fox Company and shifted attacks toward Howe Company 3 miles south, where weapons remained unmodified. Howe Company was nearly overrun and required emergency reinforcement from reserve positions. The psychological balance was shifting. Marine confidence rebuilt as they learned their weapons would fire when needed. Chinese attacks became less aggressive, shorter in duration. By December 2nd, assaults lasted minutes instead of hours. Chinese soldiers were learning that Fox Hill was too costly to take. After 5 nights of combat, Fox Company had lost 26 killed and 89 wounded. But the perimeter held intact. Officers estimated the position would have fallen on the first night without the modified weapons. Audas's 17-man machine gun crew was down to 11 men. 6 had been wounded and evacuated. The survivors kept fighting and kept holding their section of line. On December 2nd, 8,000 Marines broke out from the encirclement at Yudam-ni. Fox Hill provided the covering position for the retreat. Without Fox Company holding the mountain pass, the entire regiment would have been trapped. Audas didn't know any of this. He only knew to keep his guns firing and keep his position from falling. The relief column reached Fox Hill at 4 p.m. on December 2nd. 8,000 Marines from Yudam-ni passed through the position on their march south. Every Marine who walked past Fox Hill lived because Audas's guns had worked. On December 3rd, Fox Company evacuated with the final elements. Audas had severe frostbite on both hands and could barely hold his rifle. They carried him out on a stretcher alongside his machine gun. On December 10th, at Hagaru-ri, ordnance inspectors examined Fox Company's weapons. They found graphite contamination in all the crew-served guns. The initial reaction was confusion. Who had authorized this modification? Test firing showed the weapons functioned flawlessly in extreme cold. The inspectors didn't know whether to file charges or commendations. The Marine Corps Ordnance Board investigated in December 1950. By January 1951, they conducted official testing of graphite lubricants at a cold weather facility in the States. Their conclusion stated that graphite-based lubricants were effective for sustained fire in extreme cold conditions. In March 1951, a new technical bulletin authorized graphite for cold weather operations. Audas's name did not appear in any documentation. Credit was given to field testing during Korean operations. Audas received a Purple Heart for his frostbite wounds. He received no commendation for the modification that saved Fox Hill. Captain Barber received the Medal of Honor for the defense of Fox Hill. The citation mentioned extreme cold and equipment failures, but did not mention that the equipment failures had been solved by an enlisted Marine with crushed pencils. Audas was discharged in 1951 on medical retirement due to frostbite damage. He returned to Wisconsin and worked as a machinist. He lost parts of 3 fingers to frostbite complications over the following years. He never talked about Korea. When people asked, he said he maintained weapons. That was the job. Of the 17 men in Audas's machine gun, Section 6 were wounded at Fox Hill and survived the war. 2 were killed on the hill. 9 served through the rest of the Korean War with various wounds. They held annual reunions from 1953 to 1998. They knew what the modification had meant. Nobody else remembered. In 1997, a military historian researching the Chosin Reservoir interviewed Fox Company survivors. He heard about the pencil lead trick and tracked down Audas in Milwaukee. Audas was 76 years old and retired. He confirmed the story and said it just seemed like common sense. graphite doesn't freeze. The historian estimated the modification enabled Fox Company's successful defense, and Fox Company's defense saved over 8,000 Marines from encirclement. John Audas died in 2003 at age 82. He was buried in Arlington National Cemetery as a Korean War veteran. His obituary mentioned he was a Chosin Reservoir survivor and machine gunner. It did not mention he changed how Marines fought in winter. It did not mention his frostbitten, hands-crushing pencils in darkness. It did not mention 2,000 Chinese soldiers stopped by 17 Marines with modified weapons. That's how innovation happens in war. Not through manuals, through sergeants who see problems and don't wait for permission to save lives.